Nice.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
This is our perfectly smooth recording of the Helm Geo install.
Yeah, we're going to try to go through the instructions in the Helm charts and installing 2 different geo clusters on using 2 different Omnibus external DBs like in the docs. So as pre-flight, we've installed Omnibus on 2 different databases. They're in the same zones as the 2 clusters created here. And we're going to use just some basic passwords. The instances will be anyway firewalled from the outside, so those will be safe.
And the main reason, and this is also my first question, the main reason why we have Omnibus managed databases, even though we're using Kubernetes, is that running Postgres in Kubernetes is still experimental overall, right? So
yeah.
Is that,
Yeah, so we don't recommend running your own Postgres version, and we also don't have like a tested way of doing replication. Like the main thing of Geo is that you need to have a replicated database for the secondary as well. So in this case, we already have like the Omnibus setups, or you could also use like an external Postgres and set up the replication yourself there.
Sure.
But do we know what's the most use case scenario with our customers? Like they
I
use
think
like
the ones
external...
I've seen the most are with external databases. So you
that
basically,
makes sense.
because nowadays most of the Kubernetes clusters are in like a cloud provider, let's say GK on GCP and Amazon. So it's basically just another way of saying, just create another database in the cloud and then point your GitLab Helm chart to it instead of manually maintaining.
That's maybe something we can. I mean, this is maybe something we can do at like later iteration, because I don't see any issue with that at all, right? You just need to make sure that your databases work, right? And then point your clusters to that, right? And if the external DB handles the replication, that shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah. Cool. So in this case, we're gonna use the Omnibus ones. So we're gonna follow the docs. This is like the most straightforward one because we already have all the setup in Omnibus for like regular Geo instances. So we could just use the same for the databases and have the install in Kubernetes. So going through the docs requirements, the first line is talking about external Postgres, just as we talked now. The database, if you use an external one, is a support application, needs to be reachable from the Helm deployments, and also needs to support SSL between the primary and the secondary DB. In our case, I've already added, I think, network tags. So all the instances in this network should be reachable between each other. I've added like geodemo network tag. So, and I've also created a firewall rule that allows the traffic between all the geodemo network tag instances, which in this case are the 2 Omnibus DBs and the 2 Kubernetes clusters. So just so we don't need to firewall each port individually. Okay, so the overview, the steps should be followed in this order. Set up the Omnibus instances, okay. This is as required, we've already created those. I've already exposed the ports between each other. Install an operating system supported by Omnibus GitLab. It's Debian already installed, and install Omnibus GitLab onto it to provide external URL. That's the point where we are now. So we just installed the package without the external URL. Okay, before that information must be collected. So I've already collected the information in this file. It's basically the list of the IPs and the DNS of the DBs and the Kubernetes cluster names and the passwords.
I'm impressed by the perfect layout of the markdown tables.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of Emacs does it easy for you, so you just press a key and it auto arranges those.
Very nice.
Yeah.
It's
and
part
then...
of not using the mouse petition.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. For the Kubernetes clusters, we have again the firewall rules. As I mentioned, they're already in the same kind of network that's allowing all the traffic within. And then each cluster this provision should have enough resources. We've used like the GK bootstrap script, which is also mentioned somewhere in here to create the clusters. And then access to persistent storage. Yeah, we're not going to use external storage. So I think that's fine so far. Collect information. We already have this and the license file in the same folder. We need a bar password and a hash form. We already have them. Cool. So
this should change relatively soon as well, right?
What exactly? Which part of it?
I think there is an effort to not store plain text passwords in GitLab RB.
Yeah, there's like a
POC
issue which is trying to implement that, so this might change pretty soon in the future.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. So let's configure the primary DB first. So we're going to start with this example config. Just going to initially paste it in my editor, and then we'll actually paste it in on the server itself after we edit it. So we need to replace several items. These ones, okay. So external URL must be updated to reflect the host name of our primary instance. That makes sense, although I'm not really sure why we do have an external URL on the database, because the database should not be aware of the URL. I mean, it doesn't hurt to add it, but I don't think it will use it, to be honest. But let's go ahead and add it. Let's say, so for this test, I was going to go with this domain overall. And let's say the primary would be GitLab. This domain, and then we'll have another one for the secondary. So we're going to go ahead with HTTPS because we also wanted HTTPS. Adding the external URL, okay. And then the unique identifier for the geonode name gitlabprimary.example.com. So this doesn't need to be the exact domain. You can put it as well. It can be just like a node name, as long as we're going to use the same in the UI when we add the nodes. This is more important for the secondary, basically, so that when we add it in the primary data, when we add it in the primary UI as a geonode, we're going to need to match the geonode name and the external URL, just so the geosetup will recognize the node. So I paste it in here as the URL. To migrate false, all the services disabled. So it looks like this is also missing Puma, because I think now we're using Puma by default, and we'll likely need to also add this one. Okay.
Are you going to keep notes on those things, or should I put notes somewhere?
Do you mind if you put those, just so we keep the screen share, or we can get them after the video, after the recording is done?
Yeah, no, I put them as notes in the issue.
Okay.
Right, and
yeah,
that should help. I just say like, okay, like in config, disable the
Puma. Also disable Puma.
Do you folks know if is there a way for us to add notes in the videos? So let's say at the recording minute 5, we went through configuration. At minute 10, we looked at the external DB, so it makes it easier for folks that are going to watch the video. At least, I don't know.
I have no
it's
idea,
a question.
I don't know.
Okay, that's fine.
Not sure. It's a good idea. I'm not sure if Zoom supports it or if we can do that.
Don't bother.
Okay. And then we'd also need to configure the Postgres DB listen address. I think it's mentioned in the doc. So it's not actually mentioned. We could use 0.0.0.0, which means it's going to listen on all addresses, or in our case, since we know the internal IP and we know that it's already bypassing the firewall on this internal network, we could just listen on this IP instead of also listening on the public one as well. And then for the user password, we already have it here. I'm going to copy it. Okay. And then the list of the CID addresses. So if we leave it like that, we're going to allow all instances. In this case, it's only on an internal network, so that's fine. I'm going to leave it like that. But ideally, you want it to customize, as mentioned in the docs. You want to add your local IP, and then the IP address of the cluster and the secondary node as well. So in my case, I don't know the IP of the cluster already because we've not deployed the Helm chart yet. So I'm just going to leave it everything enabled because it's only listening on the internal network. So I think that's most of it for the config. Let's copy this and add it in the GitLab RB. Okay, and then we're going to try and reconfigure. Cool. So everything configured now. You can run a GitLab Ssl status if you want to see. Okay, that looks good.
Okay. So only log rotate
and Postgres
are actually running, which is what we want. Yeah.
So I think my internet is a bit slow. You kind of interrupted there.
Oh, sorry. This is what I would expect. You only run Postgres on log rotate.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, can you hear me or?
Yeah, I think now it's better. Sorry. Yeah. Can you hear
no
me?
Problem.
I think you're lagging a bit, Katalin, that's all.
Oh.
Yeah, we can hear you, right?
Cool. So then let's continue. So we've put this in the GitLab RB, finally configure. If we experience any issues we didn't experience, we saw Postgres and operative is running. And then we run GitLab Ssl replication password. Let's run that. We're going to set that simple password from the previous file. Okay, and then we also need to get the certificate. Going to copy this one as well, just in case we just to store it here. Cool. And then on to deploying the first chart. Cool, we're back. I'm just going to log in again in the instances. Oh, so now it worked. And the other one.
100 degrees Celsius is on your laptop.
Yeah.
Just crack 2 eggs on top of it, mate.
I think that's why it crashed earlier. Like a kernel panic. I'm not sure what's happening, but it's usually Zoom's fault. So sorry about that.
Yeah. No, it's very clearly your extensive window manager resources.
Yeah. All the transparency and stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. So where were we? So if we we got to deploying the primary geo chart. So in order to deploy this chart, we're going to use this example config first. Let me create this one as well. To go back to the geo demo folder. Let's hope this one got auto-saved. It looks like, yeah, cool. Thanks, Max. And then we're going to create a primary values file. And we're going to start configuring this. So configure host and domain. We have the domain. Let me get it from this other file. The domain is this one. And I think this is a part where we could add a bit in the docs. Like in this case, I know because I've played with a Helm chart before, but basically it's going to create actually a GitLab.this domain when it's deployed. So the domain is actually like the base domain where this install is going to live, and then it's going to create automatically GitLab dot and then Minio dot and registry dot. So we'll end up with this URL for our primary node, but the domain that actually needs to be configured is just this one. If that makes sense.
Okay, I made a note.
Thank you.
And also, that's maybe just me from sort of an outsider perspective. Reading this deploy chart, something, I would not necessarily know if I was new to this whole thing, where to actually save this file, right? And it's just on your machine anywhere, right? You just need to add it to Helm, is that right?
Yeah, that's a good point. So we actually mentioned here in the command that it's supposed to be called primary.yaml. So we should probably mention somewhere that we could.
It's just like, yeah, make a file, a YAML file, right? And then store it.
Yeah.
Because I think otherwise people may be confused.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm just confused. Who knows?
No, you're right.
No,
I think we might be able to add something like create the YAML file, and you'll use that YAML file with the Helm, right? So
yeah. Cool. So maybe I just got ahead of myself because it looks like the first thing we needed was to create the secret actually. So, and after that, I did the configuration. So let's go ahead and create a secret now.
Okay, so I have a question now. One second.
Yeah.
So, are you supposed to create the file before you're gonna run this?
So,
because basically, you just said earlier that I think I went ahead with the actual file, but then the step says, one, we'll need to create the secret, blah blah blah. Then two, you will need to do the following. So basically, the information before that is not really useful at the moment. Am I right, or am I got it wrong?
Yeah, so I think the config here is basically for point 2, to be honest. So maybe a better phrasing would be like, mingled. Yeah, put it under point 2 and say create that configuration file using this example, and then update the configuration to reflect the correct values for this one.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, but it looks like the actual.
And also, I think the order doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this specific case,
it's 100%. It's just odd to me going back to what.
No, I think what you proposed is completely correct. I was just thinking: do you have to create the file before you execute the secret file, the secret command? I don't think it matters either way.
No, right? It doesn't. But it doesn't. We just want to be sure it's as clear as possible. That's all.
Yeah. Cool. So let me create that secret. I don't want to do that. Okay. Let me just check that. This is my global kubectl version. Let me check that I'm on the primary. No. So I've just switched my context to the primary because we want to be doing stuff on the primary cluster. And let me create the secret. And it says replace password with the password for the GitLab DB user, and that's in our case, that's simple one. Okay, so we got the secret created, and then let's update the configuration to reflect the values. So global.host.domain, maybe, so I see it's actually a link, maybe it's explained further here, how actually the domain works. The base domain. Yeah, so it's actually explained in here that it's going to create GitLab.domain, minio.domain, and register the domain. So I think that makes sense. Cool, and then global.psql.host. So the hostname of the Postgres server the DB to use. Okay, so in our case, I'm going to copy it from I'm going to be using the internal IP because I'm already listening on this one and it's firewalled out. So, okay. And then have the secret geo, already created that. And then the node name. Doesn't mention the node name in here, but it should be the one that we've set in the primary.rb. Oh, and by the way, another point, this one specifically shouldn't be needed here because the GitLab Rails settings are for Rails itself, but we only run the database on this node. So pretty much the node name wouldn't do anything, even if we set it on this host. So this is actually what we need to set in here in the node name.
So this is for the database node, is that right?
Yeah. No, so it's actually the name of the geo site, basically. We say like, I see how that sounds confusing now because the setting says actually node name, but it's more like a site name, to be honest, thinking of it.
Yes, okay. Well, I hope to rename these things relatively soon.
Yeah. Cool, so g-enable true, role primary, and we don't want Postgres install, okay? I think that's all. Yeah, we also want Ssl Tls. Let's see. So to use TLS, we're going to need this. include these options in your Helm install command. Okay, so I'm going to copy this one as well. Just keep it illegal for now. So deploy the chart using this configuration. Copy this one. With Helm v2, you may need to specify the namespace. I'm using Helm v3, so that should be fine. I need to go to demos folder. Okay. And because we want to also use TLS, I'm also going to add this at the end.
Okay.
And that would be my email. And let's go. Installing it now. Cool.
I am excited.
Same. Let's see how long this takes.
Yeah, so excited that I'm going to get myself a glass.
Same. Good point.
Does it work with also Helm v1?
I don't think that's still supported. Like, I'm not even sure because I've not played with it for that long, but I've not heard anyone talk about Helm.
Because when I was reading to that docs you're showing us, if you could bring it up while this is installing, it says do this if you use Helm v2, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't say what, like it doesn't say don't do it if you use v. It's kind of like my explanation would be if I use v1, I do it without.
Yeah, I don't think Helm 1 is supported, and I don't think I'm not sure because I've not released it, but yeah, I don't think it's really used anymore.
I have much experience with Kubernetes either, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, we could probably double check after this and see if that's still possible to use. Oh,
that sounds like a plan.
Ooh, let's wait for Fabian as well.
Was it deployed that fast?
Yeah, it looks like.
That was more quick than I was expecting.
Wait for the deployment to complete and the application to come online. Once the application is reachable, log in. So I'm just going to go to gitlab.this. And it's DNS again. We need to wait for a few minutes probably for that to propagate.
So everything magically work out?
Yeah, it sounds like. But now we need to wait for a bit apparently for DNS to propagate and all that stuff. I'm just checking if that's already. No, that's not already created. Yeah, I think there is a way to see the current status. It's not mentioned in here as a command, but it should be something like git ingress. Yeah, so we got an IP, but the DNS didn't propagate yet. Let's see if we can go. No, because we don't have the host. Yeah, I'd say we wait for a bit. We could probably bypass it by creating like a manual etc hosts entry, but we wouldn't have the certificate anyway because the DNS won't be
I think it's unless we are in a rush, I think it's safe to wait. Because I think it's good to see also how usually it takes to propagate the DNS.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
I mean, obviously that's gonna, but it's gonna be different from service to another, but as a concept.
Okay, so the Acme thing, I'm assuming is like the Let's Encrypt verification thing. So it looks like I got an IP as well. So maybe we're waiting for the certificate to get generated as well. Just a presumption. I'm curious.
Do we say something like that in the docs? Like you have to allow.
Well,
10,
we say
15,
wait
20
for
minutes.
deployment to complete and the application to come online. Once the application is reachable,
okay, yeah.
But yeah, in our case, it's not reachable
That
yet.
makes sense.
I'm curious to see if we can find out what's the current state. So we have.
Mostly the reason I ask you that is like, what if the application doesn't come online in 5 minutes? What if the application doesn't come online in 10 minutes? Maybe they think it failed and there is no error message. How they can verify that? The customer can verify that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Don't know much Kubernetes for that, but I think you can look first at the ingresses,
like check the logs.
See if you get an IP, because I think the main problem is for this IP to get allocated by the cloud provider, and then the DNS to be set. And afterwards, if you get those, but it's still not happening, like anything is not happening, and the IP address gets resolved, or looks like in this case it got now. Let's see. Okay, so we didn't get the certificate yet. So if this one resolves the correct IP and nothing is still showing up in the UI, we could probably look at the pods and see if there is anyone that is not running. Yeah. I'd say we also wait for this SSL just to be safe and see if that works.
Well, like we have an SSL now, it's just that it's not signed by a known authority, right?
Yeah. So we're basically waiting for the Let's Encrypt verification, I guess.
And how is that going to work? So let's say we have a SSL now, and Let's Encrypt is going to get back to us. It's going to give us a cert. It's going to be automatically set into the. Okay.
Yeah. So it's basically this cert manager pod, which I think is doing like the verification and then also setting the correct certificate once it gets back. I think even if we look at the logs for this one, okay. Yeah, see, this one didn't get the DNS yet. It says lookup GitLab domain, no such host. So for estimate, wait for a few seconds. Just run it with follow so we can see. Okay, so we don't get an error anymore. Maybe. Yeah. Okay, it got now.
Nice.
Cool. So it's up. Nice. And now log into GitLab and you upload your license file, but navigating. Okay. So now there is a problem that it's not mentioned in here, but I think it's mentioned in the regular install docs about how to actually get that password. So let me see if I can find it in the regular docs installation. Maybe. Yeah, so initial login. I guess we would want a link for this one as well in the docs, because there is no mention about how to actually get the first password. So in the regular docs, it says that GitLab would automatically create a random password for the root user, and then you can extract it using the following command, where the name is the name of the release. And in our case, that's GitLab Geo, because that's what we ran when we created the Helm thing, so this part. So let's run this one using GitLab Geo. Okay, so this is our password. Let's hope that it works. Okay, that worked. Awesome. So let's go to the admin area and upload our license. Upload the license. Okay. Okay. Upload license. Yep. So I got the license. And now if we go to the next steps. So now basically you have to set this deployment as a Geoprimary. So to do that, we can use the task runner pod. Let's copy this command. No resources found. Right, that makes sense. So this may be another problem. So in this case, if you look at the command, we use namespace GitLab. However, I don't think we created namespace with the Helm install. Yeah, we have just the default one.
Are you still with me?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Test.
I can hear you, Catalin, and I can hear you, and I'm not sure if you can hear us.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone can hear us. Right, cool, continue.
Okay. Yeah, so I think the problem with this one is that
we didn't declare namespace. And
yeah, so basically, I'm guessing we'll have to do something like this when we create the Helm deployment. However, we didn't, so we can adapt this command by just removing the namespace because it's going to be in the default namespace. Yeah, so we see the code here.
But was it in the docs though?
No, so the Helm install docs, yeah, didn't
because
mention.
I think if it's not in the docs, then this command is not going to work because obviously they wouldn't. The
customer
would not.
Yeah, so we need to either add the namespace in here or remove the namespace from here. I think it's one of those two, because basically this one creates it with no namespace, but this one expects a namespace, so it's not going to work.
So in the note, it said like, hey, you may need to deploy this with a namespace. You know, but you said I'm on v3, so I don't need to. So, you know, do we should we add a namespace by default? I don't know if that's a good or bad idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We may need to.
I think
ask the distribution team on this one. Yeah, perfect. Sorry.
No, I was just about to say that it all depends on how do we we write the following. I think the namespace is not important. It's just for if you have a lot of deployments, it's easy for you to spot, right? Because you're gonna set a name for it. But if you're just gonna set this, 99% of the time is gonna be default unless they manually specify the name of it.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Catalin.
Yeah. I think best practice is to usually set the namespace. I'm not sure why exactly we don't have one here, but we may need to ask the distribution team. Maybe there is a reason, maybe there is something that's necessary, because I also see it's upgrade install, so I'm not sure if that makes any difference. But yeah, basically we at least need to mention if we don't add the default namespace that you may need to change the commands before to remove the namespace if you don't add one.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So then we're going to run this one and copy the task runner name and run the set primary array task. Cool, that worked. And now we also want to run a GitLab geo check. Okay. You should see the output similar to below. Don't worry about the exception, as Kubernetes containers will not have access to the host clock. Okay, so we do get that. And then authorized keys command is also no. Is expected, is checking for a local SSH server, which is actually present in the GitLab shell chart deployed elsewhere. Okay, so that seems to be expected. Cool. So now if we refresh this one, we're probably going to see the primary node. Yeah, and it's still not yet updated, but it should be soon.
Cool.
Cool. So next is configuring the secondary DB. Let's copy this config as well. Okay. We need to replace our item. External must be updated to reflect the host name of our secondary instance. So GitLab secondary.example.com. Let's use our domain here. GitLab secondary dot this one. Again, I don't think the external URL would matter here, but let's set it just for to have it in here. Okay. The GeoNode name must be replaced with a unique name for your node. In this case, let's go with, yeah, let's go with the entire DNS just to be safe. Doesn't need to be, it could be just a unique name. And again, I'm not sure this is needed on the database host, to be honest, but let's set it here as well. Everything false. We also need to add Puma as in the previous example. And then user password hash must be replaced with the hash form of the GitLab password. Yeah, so the Postgres settings, listen address, again, as in the primary host, it's already in that internal network, so I'm going to just use the internal IP for this one instead of listening on all addresses. So it's this one. And then for the user password hash, I'm going to copy the GitLab user password hash. Okay. The MD5 auth CIDR addresses, as in the previous example, it should be customized to hold IPs of the clients that could connect to this instance. In this case, the local host and the IP of the secondary chart. But in my case, I'm already in that internal network, so it's firewalled out from the outside, so I can keep all the IPs allowed in it. And the same for the GeoPostgreSQL. It's going to be the same IP. I'm going to copy the IP. And then the GitLab Geo user password hash, which is this one. Okay. Same here with the both CIDR addresses. Same story, exact same story. And then for the actual GitLab user password is the simple one that we have set there. Those are all explained in here as well. Must be replaced with the hash form of the GitLab Geo password, which we already did. The list of explicit IP addresses or address blocks. Okay, and then the password is used here to allow Omnibus to automate the Postgres configuration. Cool. There is another explanation of the MD5 auth CIDR addresses that we've discussed for the primary node. So this can be left as 0.0.0, meaning all addresses. It's not best practice. However, in my case, I'm on an internet network, so that should be fine. Cool. Once the configuration above is prepared, let me check TCP connectivity to the primary node using this command. So going back to the databases, I'm replacing the primary node IP with this one. Okay, yeah, we got connected, right, number 0, which is the same as in here. If this step fails, it didn't fail. Place the content in GitLab GitLab RP. Cool. Let's copy this. Paste this here, and then I think it's going to be a reconfigure. Yeah. Okay. And then if there is any error, we just need to restart Postgres. Yeah, getting ahead. Let's wait for the reconfigure. Okay. And now place the primary DB certificate into primary.crt. Primary.crt. Set paste. And I'm going to copy the certificate from here. Okay. And then install the primary CRT file. And we're going to use this command. Cool. Postgres will now only recognize that it's a certificate. Okay. Test that the GitLab PSQL user can connect to the primary node's database. So we're going to copy this command, and it seems here that it's a primary node IP. So I'm just going to copy without that and manually add that in. And it's just getting it quicker from here. Okay, the simple password. Yep, that works. Awesome. And then replicate the databases. Replace primary DB host with IP. Okay. So let me just paste this one again. Copy the command. So we just, instead of the primary database host, we've used IP of the primary DB. It's not replication. The simple password. See if everything looks okay. Awesome. So it looks like replication started. And then we also need to run a reconfigure. Okay, that's probably going to take a bit. So let's look at the next section. So now we need to copy the secrets from the primary cluster to the secondary cluster. These two secrets. Change your kubectl context to that of your primary. Okay, the configure finished. I think we are already on the primary. Yeah, we are on the primary. Just change it again to be sure. Collect these secrets from the primary deployment. Okay. Error, yeah. So the same problem as before. We have the extra GitLab namespace, but we didn't set it when we created the deployment. So we'd also need to update these docs.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to run without a namespace. That worked. Yeah. Okay. And also get the second one. Cool. Change your kubectl context to that of your secondary. So let me change the secondary context and now apply these secrets. Okay, that one got created and not this one. Cool. Now we need to create a secret containing the DB passwords. Replace the passwords below with appropriate values. Okay. Let's copy this one. And now we already know that this is both of these are simple ones. Okay. And let's run this. Cool. So we've created the GeoSecret as well. And now to the geosecondary chart deployment. This section will be performed the secondary Kubernetes cluster. In order to deploy this chart as geosecondary, we'll start from this example configuration. Yeah, so again, as before, it may be a bit, maybe it should be inferred by the link in here that it should be called secondary.yaml, but we need to make it more clear, yeah. It's the same as before, it doesn't say what to actually do with it. So let's copy this one and put it in the secondary.yaml file. Okay. And we can see we have host suffix secondary and the domain. I think the suffix is explained in the docs here, where it says that, see below. Okay, the host suffix is appended to the subdomain when assembling a host name using the base domain. So the example below result in using external host names like GitLab staging, host suffix staging. Yeah, so basically, if we use secondary here, we're going to end up with GitLab secondary domain. So let's copy the domain from here. The database connection. Again, for this one, we're going to need the secondary database. Let's just copy the internal IP, basically as we did for the primary chart, and leave everything else unchanged. Geosecondary node name. So again, for the node name as well, we're going to use the one that we've also set in the secondary RB, which I don't think it's going to matter in the actual database, but it's going to matter here. So let's put it the same, secondary, okay. And then for PSQL, for the GeoPostgres, we want the tracking database connection settings. In this case, because it's an Omnibus instance and it's on the same host with the secondary DB, is going to be the same host, the same internal IP, and it's going to post to the secondary Omnibus instance. But if you use like external databases, you're going to want to point this to the tracking database instead of the secondary database as in here. I think the docs are written with Omnibus DBs in mind, which is why it uses Geo2. But we may want to make that clear if they use external DBs. So we're going to leave that as is. Okay, I think that's all. And now deploy the chart using this configuration. Okay.
And you also need the SSL stuff.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right. Good point. Let me copy the command again. This one. Oh. Okay. That's probably going to take a few minutes as well. And then another few for the DNS. And I think that will be most of it. We can double check afterwards. think the next steps would be to add the node on the primary as well. So it recognizes it as the secondary. And after that, the deployment should be crossed fingers, complete. Okay, that was fast. So status deployed. Okay, and now it's going to be like we've seen in the docs, GitLab -secondary, but we'll also likely need to wait for the DNS for this one as well.
Okay.
So let's see. Yeah, not yet. Let's look at ingress. Okay, yeah. So they didn't get an IP yet. They're likely going to get an IP, and afterwards set the DNS and then wait for the SSL certificate. And afterwards, we should be able to reach the instance. I think we can do like -W to watch. Yeah, cool. Okay, so they got an IP. The certificate stuff got created, and they likely also need to wait for an IP. Okay, so those also got IPs. Let's see if the DNS is still, yeah, they still didn't get set. Yeah, we see a few pods are still initializing. Geo cursor 2 out of 3 in the psychic as well. It's a waiting game. We got a init error over there. Should probably still wait for the certificate and all that stuff, but let's see. what's happening with this pod. Okay, so it's running. I should probably not watch with watch because it looked like an error, but afterwards it ran. So yeah, not sure if it's like a Kubernetes thing or there was actually an error, but now it's running. Okay, so this got the IP. Where is it? Here. Oh, so we got the hostname as well, the certificate. That's awesome. But now we're redirected to the sign-in. However, we don't want that because it's a geo secondary. So we're going to continue with the steps. Yeah, it says that. Wait for the deployment to complete and the application to come online. So it came online now. And let's go to the next step. Add secondary geo instance via primaries. So now that both DBs are configured and applications are deployed, we must tell the primary that the secondary exists. Makes sense. Let's go to the primary in the geo admin area. Here, just going to refresh that quick. And then click on the new node and add a secondary instance. Use the full URL for the URL. Do not check this primary node box. New node. Fill the URL. Let's copy the URL. It's this one. Check that. Just add it directly. That's actually for the secondary. So we're going to add the secondary suffix. And then for the name, it's also mentioned in the docs. Fill in the name with the global geo node name. The value must always match exactly character for character. So I'm just going to copy the node name from here and use it for, oh, not here, use it for name. Okay. And then save. Cool. So it's still 404 because we've just added it, but once added to the admin panel, the secondary instance will automatically start replicating missing data. Meanwhile, the primary will start only 5 secondary instances of any changes, so the secondary instance can happen those immediately. Okay. Confirm operational status. The final step is to verify the geo replication status on the secondary instance once fully configured via the task runner pod. Okay, so let's see. Again, the namespace problem. We're just going to remove the namespace. Okay, we got the pod. kubectl exec di. Copy the name. It's interesting that we use bash in here and then manually run the task, while for the one above we've just ran it inline. So not sure it make a difference, but it's just a different way of doing it. This is bash -l. And run the GitLab geocheck task. Okay, so you see the same output as before with the expected errors. And okay, yeah, so it looks like geo is healthy, only secondary. Let's see what the UI tells us. Let's go again, refresh. Okay, so we get redirected to the primary. Click authorized so that we can log in, and yeah, that's it. Awesome. You're on secondary, only geo node. Cool.
Cool.
Nice.
Can you create something on the primary?
Yes.
And just see if it actually replicates?
See the replication. Yeah. Let me refresh this page as well. Let's see that everything's healthy. Yeah. Cool. And now let's create a project called GeoDemo. And then initialize with a README. Create. Okay. Let's go on the secondary. Yeah, it's already there. Awesome.
Very nice.
Success.
Okay, so if I recap, except for a few sort of clarifications in the docs, this actually works.
Yep, that's right.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome to see that you get, and it doesn't take that long, like just deploying the charts and then configuring most of the part is just waiting for the DNS and the certificates.
Great.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, I have notes, but I can actually, so let me quickly read what I what I made. I made only a few notes, right? I said like, we need disable Puma on database nodes, should be added to RB example file.
Yep, that's right.
Add to the docs where to store the Helm chart file.
Yeah, configuration. Yeah, the file. Okay.
Yeah. Primary.yaml and secondary.yaml.
Yep.
Hosts only needs the base domain in config. Yeah, the example file, primary.yaml file should be under section 2.
Yep. And that's the same for the secondary.
Yeah. Add namespace to deploy the chart using this configuration.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I wrote, also make it clear that you need to create a secondary.yaml, but that's kind of implicit with what I said already. Anything else?
I think that's most of it. Let me just quickly skim through the docs again. Yeah, we probably also want to double check the GeoNode name in the database, but I don't think that's needed. And
check you need. That's the role, the GitLab Rails options.
Yeah, in the database GitLab RBs.
Yeah, anything else?
No, I think that's straightforward. Maybe for the secondary chart, if we want to explain a bit more, that the psql.host should be the address of the secondary DB and geo psql host would be the tracking database.
Okay, let me. So for secondary, can you repeat?
To mention that the psql.host configuration should be for the secondary database, like if using external databases. psql.host would be the secondary and geo.psql.host would be the tracking database.
So geo.sql.host is for the tracking database.
Yeah, that's right.
Global PSQL host is for the tracking. Yeah. And not for the main database, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this is version 13.4.1, actually, the latest?
Yeah, I believe so. Let me double check in the settings. Yeah, it's latest.
Okay. Okay.
Awesome.
Cool. So I made a comment. So I would argue we can maybe close this issue on our build board by fixing the documentation.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So if we just put an MR up on against those things, fixing those little things, then we can review, and then we can just, once that's in, we can close.
Yeah.
I would say.
Makes sense.
Well, it's exciting.
Indeed. It was fun.
Super. Yeah, thanks. I mean, we're even on time.
Yeah. Cool, then I'm going to stop the recording for now. And
yeah.
Okay.